The shoots for the Queen's Medal, which is a series of medals they get for the top winning team. They've got the Commonwealth shooting in Bisley. Bisley's about 30 mile out of London to the south. There's about 1,600 people there at a time. You shoot the weapon that belongs to that particular nation or whatever country it is.
John, what sort of shooting will you actually be doing?
It's a varied variety of types. You do deliberate shooting, which is lying down prone. You do a kneeling, standing. Then you do the run down from 500 yards, which you 2 at 500 yards lying, 2 at 400 yards sitting, 300 yards kneeling and 100 yards standing, 2 at each. Then you do various practice at 300 yards and 200 yards, but it's all a variety of type of shooting. It's not deliberate prone, it's offhand shooting.
John, how's Australia fared in the past?
It's done fairly well. The last time they didn't win, but the first time they went there, I believe, was about 1900. They won it there, but that was a member of all-around groups like rifle shooters, and they'd all got together, and they all were army personnel, and they won it then, about 1901.
The team that will be competing in the Queen's Shoot in England comprises 10 team members and 1 reserve. Besides Staff Sergeant Webber and Corporal Parker, 2 men from the Singleton Army Base will also be competing, and they are Sergeant Sowell and Warrant Officer Islott. One of the Australians' main trump cards, however, will be Warrant Officer Bowden from Sydney, who this year won the civilian Queen's Shoot, a great honour indeed.
The future of the Newcastle Maritime Museum hangs in the balance while the issue of funding is thrown back and forth. Now, in a bid to resolve the matter, the Council has decided to apply for the establishment of a national maritime museum. It's ironic that on one hand the Council should seek to have a national museum established here, and on the other defer funding for its own regional outlet at Fort Scratchley.
I think it would be slightly ironical if Newcastle puts in for a National Maritime Museum and then does not demonstrate a strong support for the Maritime Museum that it already has.
And you think that we'll have to do that to get national backing?
Yes, I think so, yes, because when a decision is made about the location, there'll obviously be people coming around to the cities and checking out the environment. And if Newcastle has demonstrated a long period of assisting people in these areas, I think it'll help it in its case.
It might come as a bit of a surprise to find that 6 months without injury in an underground mine is something of a record in the natural nature of the industry. The safety record of Mooney is actually way ahead of the underground mine, running second appears to be stopping from number 2 with 25 accidents in 3 days. The award made today by the National Safety Council is the second of its coal and allied hit. As one of the 18 months since it started. Since the plaque was struck, already another 25 accidents in 3 days have been notched up.
But what is it that sets your operation here apart from other collieries? Why is the safety record so good?
Probably working conditions are slightly better here, and it's a small team, a close-knit team that work together, and this helps the safety record.
What sort of accidents spoil the safety record normally?
Small accidents like cut hands and damaged fingers and someone dropping something on their toe and this type of thing.
So just how long do you think you're going to be able to go? It's up to 175 days now, isn't it?
Possibly it'd be better to ask one of these gentlemen how long they're going to go.
What do you reckon?
Oh, another 6 months easy.
When the Oriana sailed into Newcastle Harbour yesterday afternoon, it was history in the making. At 42,000 tonnes, the P&O liner is the biggest ever to visit the city. Her brief stop in Newcastle certainly didn't go unnoticed. Thousands of people crammed the wharves just to gaze in amazement at the ship's massive proportions. On board, the Oriana is reminiscent of an era long gone. Oozing with luxury, it's a place where words like recession really have no meaning. In catering for the needs of passengers, nothing has been overlooked. Tucked away off the maze of narrow stairways and corridors are things you just wouldn't expect to find on board a ship. Many people refer to cruiser ships as floating hotels. The Oriana is more like a floating city. Along with the hundreds of cabins, there's restaurants and bars and shops catering for all tastes. And there's even a place to leave the children so mum and dad can relax undisturbed over a drink or a game of cards. There's no shortage of outdoor entertainment areas either, with a games deck, 3 swimming pools and plenty of spots just to lie and soak up the sun. To make sure every passenger is well catered for, the Oriana carries a staff of 800 who, to use the words of their captain, can provide everything except the sunshine. Captain John Young has only been in charge of the Oriana for a year, but after 33 years in the business, he's no stranger to passenger ships.
Started in the BI, which is part of P&O, and most of the last 20 years have been in passenger ships, and much of the time before that. I came before this ship from the Pacific Princess, better known as the Love Boat, and the Sun Princess, where I was 7.5 years on those 2 ships on the west coast of America. And before that I was captain of a ship called Uganda, which takes children on cruises. It is now taking troops to the Falklands, would you believe?
You must have had an interesting life so far.
Well, I've enjoyed it, yes. I think so, yes.
What can you tell us about the Oriana itself?
Well, she's, as you see, a very big ship. She's the world's 4th biggest passenger ship. She has very powerful turbines, which made her in a day the fastest ship running from Britain to Australia. She ran in those days at 27 knots, and we've cut that down to save fuel, obviously. But she's still a very fast ship. She's one of the first ships to have side propulsion and, bow thrusters. She has 4 thrusters, 2 forward, 2 aft. She has a crew of 800. She carries 1,670 passengers. And she's a happy ship. She's all right.
Bringing the Oriana to Newcastle wasn't easy for the Jays Travel Company. It's taken the company's executives several years to convince P&O that they could produce the numbers necessary to make the stop worthwhile. 600 people boarded the liner in Newcastle last night. Earlier in the day, from the official passenger terminal in Sydney, only 400 people set off. Jays are now working on making the liner's visit to Newcastle an annual event. The Oriana sailed out of the harbour last night right on schedule at 8 o'clock, with both ship and passengers being warmly farewelled by thousands of people. It was a traditional send-off with all the usual cheering and waving, as well as band music and, of course, plenty of streamers. Those on board are headed for the sunny ports of Honiero, Santo, Vila, Suva and Lautoka. Last night's match between Newcastle and New Zealand was not intended to be fiercely competitive. But while the spirit of the match may have been friendly, the squash certainly wasn't. The pace was fast and the playing aggressive. The home side proved it was up to some of the best New Zealand had to offer. The Kiwis were certainly good, but they couldn't match the standard of players like Bob Pratt, who has represented New South Wales, and John Martin, who is ranked as the state's number 2 player. The challenge finished up with the Newcastle side winning 3 sets, 3-2, 3-0, 3-0. New Zealand's Stephen Cunningham, playing in his first overseas tour, defeated Newcastle junior Jared Atford 3-2 in the final set. Last night's match was a warm-up to the New Zealand versus Australia test, which will be played in Sydney on Sunday.
The game between Marconi and KB United was originally set down to be played on the 4th of June. It has been deferred at the request of Marconi 3 times. First from the 4th of June, and then on the 11th of June, and finally this week we requested the game be played at the International Sports Centre on Saturday the 18th of June. Marconi declined to play the match because of the reason, which we feel is farcical, that one of their players happens to be getting married on that particular day. Tonight our directors have made a decision whereby we have now stated, or will be stating to the National League, that the game be played here in Newcastle on Wednesday the 29th of June.
You're also in dispute with Sydney Olympic. Can you tell us a little bit about that one?
The Sydney Olympic game that was supposed to be played on the 29th of May was called off by the Sydney Olympic officials. The National League Committee have ruled that Sydney Olympic will be placed on a $1,000 bond, and the game is now scheduled to be played in September. This evening our directors have made a decision where we are claiming a forfeit of that game, and we will not, and I repeat, we will not be going to Sydney to play that game in September.
A Falcon win could put the team into outright third position, but this would not alter the playoff draw. Sydney City Supersonics are unbeaten at home, but if ever the Falcons have a chance, then this is it. Mercurial guard Gordy McLeod has a knee injury and he'll be rested. McLeod was the spark plug when Sydney defeated the Falcons in Newcastle by 12 points, and without McLeod the Supersonics do not have a recognised ball distributor, and the Falcons will most certainly press all over the court. On offence, the Falcons will have to overcome the tall zone defence applied by the Supersonics on the mini-ball-sized court at Alexandria. One other problem exists for the Falcons too, and that's the Supersonics coach, the magical Owen Wells. The Falcons have been working to reach peak form and fitness over the next few weeks, and will use this game as further preparation.
It was far from ideal conditions for netball this afternoon, but both sides seemed undaunted by the cold and wet. When Newcastle met Sutherland during the 3-day state netball championships in Sydney last weekend, they won by a small margin. Going into today's state league match, Newcastle was fourth in the points score, with Sutherland in fifth. At half-time, the locals led 23-12. They kept the solid advantage and won with a final score of 46 to Sutherland's 28. Particularly impressive for Newcastle was goal shooter Jenny Wilkins. Next weekend is a busy one for the local side. They play Bankstown on Saturday and Manly Warringah on Sunday.
The damage to the Power Cat pieces is apparent in these pictures taken from the Manly Coast Guard vessel as the damaged boat was being towed ashore in the early hours of this morning. Her skipper, Alan Robb, died in the collision. The drama began about 6:30 last night when Pieces was summoned from Russell Island to pick up passengers on the mainland. On the way, she collided in heavy rain with her sister craft, Bits, already laden with passengers. 8 of the 26 passengers on Bits were ferried to hospital. Today, police joined Harbours and Marine Department officers at the Redland Bay quayside to examine the damage to Pieces. There was little evidence of the drama and heroism of the night before. The skipper of the Islander, 29-year-old Tim Brown, received a call for help from the boat Bits and was first on the scene 9 minutes later. He took on 26 passengers, several of whom were injured. Despite earlier reports, he says none were in the water. Brown was back at work today, although still badly shaken. His quick action may have meant the difference between one death and many.
The meeting will be run along similar lines to the mini economic summit held at the Newcastle City Hall last May. The state government, local councils, the Hunter Development Board, the Labour Council and the Newcastle Trades Hall will all be represented. Today's meeting, however, is expected to be more specific in its approach to the region's economic problems. Apparently, it will focus on the allocation of funds for infrastructure development.
Well, it's a pretty unique meeting, I think, that to the extent that the federal government has asked the state government to convene a meeting, both in Wollongong and Newcastle, of various people, to have a look at what they perceive as priorities in terms of development of additional infrastructure in the area, because what I understand is that the government have drawn up contingent plans to invest money in the regions to assist in, when the economy starts to turn around, the building of infrastructure to service the needs of the community when that happens.
And which spending priorities will the Trades Hall Council be putting forward?
Well, we basically see 4 areas, and whether they're interpreted as being infrastructure or not, I suppose, is up to speculation, but we see the Hunter District Water Board ought to have some priority, shipbuilding, ship repair, tourism. In the main, they're areas that we see are absolutely necessary for spending, in particular public spending.
The accident happened at about 7 o'clock yesterday morning near the Burrell turnoff on the Pacific Highway. Police believe the combination of fog and the slippery road surface caused the accident. They say the car, which was heading north, spun out of control into the path of the oncoming tourist bus. The bus, which was on its way from Brisbane to Sydney, ran off the road and crashed into a tree. 15 people were taken to Bulahdelah Hospital and later transferred to hospitals in Newcastle. 2 are reported to be seriously injured. Rescue units from Bulahdelah, Port Stephens and Newcastle were called in to free the trapped, and ambulances from as far afield as Dungog and Newcastle conveyed the injured to hospital. Police say the driver of the car, a 36-year-old man from Darlinghurst, was killed instantly.